This is Chris Isham, the Washington Bureau Chief for CBS News, and this is Flashpoints. I'm here as always with our national security analyst, Juan Zarate. Juan?
Good to see you, Chris.
So let's talk a little bit today about the North Korea. We learned yesterday that on April 30th, or around April 30th, the defense minister of North Korea was executed by a firing squad which consisted of 6 anti-aircraft guns. It would seem to me slightly overkill, to say the least.
Dramatic.
And quite dramatic.
Yeah.
Apparently it was in front of a military academy, in front of an audience of people, so it was obviously intended to send a message.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Well, what you see, and this is a subject of some speculation with analysts who look at North Korea carefully, is a question of whether or not Kim Jong-un really has control of his regime, and whether or not his attempts to weed out those who are proving insubordinate, demonstrating treasonous behavior, or just challenging his rule in any way, perceived or real, they are being executed or removed from power. Now, we've seen this. This is not new. Dating back to 2013, soon after his assumption of power, he killed his uncle and the cadre of advisors around his uncle in a very dramatic and powerful move. And that was seen as really his attempt to ensconce his power and establish his rule.
That was the time I think he said his uncle was worse than a dog.
That's right, and I think there were some reports, it hasn't been verified, that he actually executed his uncle by throwing his body to dogs. And so it's not clear if that actually happened. But to your point earlier, what he's doing is demonstrating with great brutality what insubordination in the current context means. It will mean execution and death, and likely exiling, if not death, of your family members and those who are around you.
It also shows some insecurity at the very top of the regime.
Absolutely, and that's what's interesting about the timing here, because there had been some analysis by experts that he had begun to establish his rule, that he was beginning to show elements of governance that didn't suggest that kind of insecurity. This suggests quite the opposite, that he remains insecure in his rule and that he's willing to do these kinds of dramatic things to establish his rule. This is really disconcerting, not just for the U.S., but for China. Keep in mind that China's been very worried about this new ruler for some time. The uncle that he killed in 2013 was very close to the Chinese. The group of advisors around that uncle had also been close to the Chinese. And the Chinese in recent weeks have been really signaling some concern about North Korea and what's happening internally, as well as the acceleration of their nuclear program. And that's unusual for China to be signaling this in some public ways at a time when I think Pyongyang has fallen outside of the complete control of Beijing.
Maybe they're beginning to wonder whether perhaps this young man really is crazy.
Maybe a bit. I think they're always, they and other countries like the U.S. have always been worried about the stability of the regime, the stability of the mentality of the regime. And I think the challenge, Chris, here is that, and you know this from your discussions with your sources, there's a lack of sense of what this leader is really about. Even though he was educated in the West, really a lack of sense as to what his guiding principles are, what his state of mind really is. And we often joke, but it's the reality, that Dennis Rodman has had more contact with this leader than any other official of the U.S. government. And so it's really still a mystery, and we've got to read these events then like tea leaves to try to determine his state of mind and the state of the regime.
And I guess something we need to watch, because this is, after all, is a gentleman who's got control of more than 50 nuclear weapons.
Nuclear weapons, expanding their military reach. Reports just this week that they're expanding their submarine capabilities and trying to develop missile technology that will allow them to put potentially a nuclear device on an intercontinental ballistic missile. I mean, that's really a danger here. And if that's the case, then North America's at risk directly, and we've got a real problem on our hands.